The desert, for all its beauty, is not gentle. That truth revealed itself the following evening. Matthew and Abba Elias had spent the afternoon gathering dry branches from a rocky grove near the cliffs. The cracked jar hung from Matthew's belt, tapping quietly with every step, a reminder of lessons learned and grace received. But as the sun began to sink, the wind shifted, sharply, suddenly, like a breath drawn in anger. Elias paused, lifting his head. The air had changed. The silence carried a warning. "What's happening?" Matthew asked. "A storm is coming," Elias said. "We must return to the cave." They quickened their pace, but the wind picked up faster than they could move. Sand swept across the ground in long, ghost-like ribbons. The temperature dropped, the light dimmed, and a low growl echoed across the valley. A sandstorm. Matthew's pulse quickened. The sky darkened as swirling clouds of dust rose like an approaching army. Elias grabbed Matthew's arm. "Stay close to me." They moved quickly, shielding their faces with their robes. But the desert storm surged without mercy. Sand lashed against Matthew's skin like thousands of tiny needles. The air thickened, making breathing harder. "Elias!" Matthew shouted. I can't see." "Do not fear," Elias called back. "I am here." But the storm roared louder, drowning the monk's voice. Matthew's vision blurred. His heart pounded wildly. Then, out of nowhere, a sharp gust tore the cracked jar from his belt. It tumbled across the sand, rolling into the storm's swirling chaos. "My jar!" Matthew cried instinctively and ran after it. "Matthew, stop!" Elias called. But the storm swallowed the sound. Matthew stumbled forward blindly, reaching for the faint shape of the jar. Wind roared in his ears. The world became a spinning blur of sand and panic. His foot caught on a rock, and he fell hard. Sand filled his mouth. He coughed, choking, struggling to breathe. "I'm going to die," he thought in terror. "I'm going to die out here." A sudden wave of dread surged through him. It wasn't just fear, it was the resurfacing of every anxiety he had buried beneath work, success, perfection, and pressure. The desert storm awakened all of them at once. He curled into himself, shielding his face. Tears mixed with sand. "God, please," he whispered. "Help me." The world roared back with wind and fury. Then, suddenly, warmth. A hand touched his shoulder. Firm. Solid. Steady. "Matthew." The voice was calm, deep, and unwavering. "Elias." Matthew looked up through tear-blurred eyes. Elias knelt beside him, sand whipping against his robe. His face was peaceful despite the storm. "I told you," Elias said gently, "I am here. Even when you cannot hear me." Matthew trembled. I panicked. "I lost the jar. I lost you." Elias placed a hand over Matthew's heart. "Fear is loud. God is gentle. Which one will you listen to?" Matthew's breath broke. "I don't know how to stay calm, not when everything feels out of control." "That is why we face the fire," Elias said. "The fire?" Elias nodded. "What you feel now," he continued, "is not the storm's power but your own fear rising to the surface. When fire tests gold, impurities rise. When storms test the heart, buried fears come into the light." The wind howled around them, yet Elias's words felt clearer than anything Matthew had ever heard. "You must stand," Elias said. I I can't. You can, Elias replied. Not by your strength, by God's. The monk helped Matthew to his feet. The sandstorm still raged, but Elias stood tall, like a rooted tree bending but never breaking. Follow me, Elias said, gripping Matthew's arm. They leaned into the storm, step by step, until a faint orange glow appeared through the swirling dust. It flickered like a beacon. The fire, Matthew whispered. Elias nodded. Our refuge. They reached a hollow between two rocks where Elias had prepared a small shelter days earlier. Inside, protected from most of the wind, a fire still burned, fierce, steady, defiant. Elias guided Matthew to sit beside it. The fire crackled, illuminating their faces with warm, dancing light. The storm roared outside, but the flames offered comfort, clarity, and breath. Matthew leaned forward, watching sparks rise into the air. Why doesn't the fire die? He asked. Because, Elias said, fire is strengthened by wind. What seems to extinguish it only makes it burn brighter. Matthew stared, stunned by the metaphor. So the storm doesn't mean I'm failing? No, Elias said firmly. The storm means you are being strengthened. Matthew felt tears sting his eyes again. But this time, they were not from fear. Elias continued, every pilgrim faces the test of fire. It reveals what remains after fear has done its worst. And what remains? Matthew whispered. Faith, Elias said. Always faith. The fire crackled louder, as if agreeing. Matthew looked down at his hands. I think. I left my jar behind. Elias reached into the shadows of the shelter and pulled out the cracked jar. Matthew gasped. How? I picked it up before finding you, Elias said with a gentle smile. Because I knew you would return for it. Matthew held the jar close. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have run. You reacted as humans do, Elias said. But trust is learned in storms, not in calm. They sat in silence, the fire warming their faces while the storm continued its furious dance outside. Matthew felt something inside him harden, not in a cold way, but in a strong way. In the way clay becomes solid when shaped by heat. Elias? Matthew whispered. Yes, my son. Will there be more storms? Elias smiled faintly. Many. But someday, you will walk into them with confidence, not fear. Matthew looked into the fire. Its glow reflected in his eyes. And the fire, he asked. It will always burn, Elias said, as long as you remember who kindled it. Outside, the storm began to soften. The wind's roar faded slowly into a whisper. Matthew leaned back, breathing deeply. The fire crackled one last time, sending sparks upward like tiny stars, each one carrying a story of its own. He whispered a quiet prayer, Lord, strengthen me in the storm and let your fire burn in me. And the desert, once more, listened.